As most of you know, affordability is always top of mind for me, especially here in Reno, where we've seen such dramatic changes in affordability very quickly. But really, all markets across the country, due to higher interest rates and home prices, affordability isn't great. It's just that here in Reno, we really don't like change, do we? We tend to get really grumpy about things like density at the same time that we're really mad about things like home prices. We're just silly like that, you know? Silly like golf courses in the center of a city where the lack of houses is a huge component in why they cost so much. Don't get me wrong. I live near two beautiful, large, expansive golf courses in the same zip code that is a central part of town. And sometimes when I drive by them, I think how beautiful they are. Other times when I drive by them, I think how many houses could go in that spot. I just wonder, because while it certainly wouldn't be low-income housing that would go in that spot, when you increase the supply of a good over time, it brings down the cost of the good. But I digress. In talking about affordability, millennials often come up. They, or I should say we, because technically I'm an elder millennial, especially considering how much I've aged in the past year. Not that you can tell at all. But millennials, we've had a hard go. We graduated college in 2008, 2009, basically somewhere in that neighborhood that was right smack in the middle of an economic crisis known as the Great Recession. We likely saw loved ones lose homes and jobs during that time. Then when we were really, trying to gain some traction and finally establish a little bit of financial security, the pandemic hit and changed everything for everyone. People talk about millennials a lot, with good reason, because we're the largest demographic of buyers in the real estate market and really in the marketplace as a whole. We are the largest group of consumers. People also talk about how we have different priorities. We waited longer to have children, to buy homes. The consensus seems to be that millennials value experiences over possessions. Many millennials would rather rent and keep their quality of life than live in a neighborhood where they don't want to. It's pretty interesting as a whole to watch all the ways that this generation is different. Now, to pivot, but just momentarily, because I will come back to millennials, this will all come full circle. In predicting what's going to happen with the economy, a recession, and interest rates, many economists have been looking backwards. They've been looking at historical trends, which really screwed everyone. Because if we looked at what happened in previous economic cycles, at this point, inflation should be under control and interest rates should have been cooling down to the fives because we would be in a recession, a full-blown, unarguable recession. The problem is we can't look at history because we've never been in a similar situation as we are right now. We've never been here before. We've never had the Fed play such an active role in the marketplace for over a decade. You see, the Fed didn't start stimulating the economy in the pandemic, as we all remember. They actually started in 2009 during the Great Recession. They've held interest rates down well over 10 years, and at several points during that decade also handed out free money. If we're going to be technical about this, it wasn't every year since 2009, but there have been 4 periods of quantitative easing since then. Quantitative easing is basically the Fed or the central bank of a country treating all its citizens like toddlers and feeding them lots of sugar to keep them hyped up. Sugar equals money in this analogy. What happens when you give your kids too much sugar? The sugar high is fun for them. Then there's a crash that's loads of fun for you. The crash is inflation in this analogy. Some of you guys have heard this analogy from me before about toddlers and sugar and quantitative easing because it's one of my favorites. The first sugar rush lasted from 2008 to 2010. But even in 2010, they kept the Fed funds rate low and eventually just went ahead and announced another round of quantitative easing that lasted until June of 2011. About a year later, they got after it again and kept going until October 2014. Between 2014 and 2020, when the next round of quantitative easing popped up again in response to the pandemic, it wasn't like they took the sugar jar away completely. Headed into the COVID crisis, the Fed funds rate was only between 1.5 and 1.75%. So when Trump is yelling at the Fed to stimulate the economy, they don't have really anywhere to go down except to zero, which they did. They hit it, and we all remember what happened then. When you look at it like that, it really becomes less shocking that inflation has been so sticky, right? That's a long time of being fed sugar. The Fed has enabled, catered to, and fueled inflation flames truly since 2008. Now, this is not me saying that they shouldn't have gotten involved and that the monetary policy was all wrong. They did need to help the economy. That's not my point at all. My point is you can see why haven't been able to take down inflation as quickly as we would have liked. It's kind of like getting pregnant. They say it takes you 9 months to put on all that weight. For me, it took me 9 months to put on 50 pounds. And to make me feel better, people said that's not going to fall off right away. It's going to take time to lose it. Although hopefully inflation won't follow the same ratio in terms of timelines as I did because I'm 22 months out and I'm not back to balanced. Anyways, it took 10 years to build inflation up. So it will take some time to bring it back down. The Fed claimed inflation was transitory. They kept saying this. They kept saying there was nothing to worry about. Everything's fine until March of 2022. So we're only 19 months into our weight loss when it comes to inflation. Circling back to millennials, I told you I'd bring this back. We have an entire generation of Americans who have led their entire adult life in an economy stimulated by the government. They have never experienced a completely fair marketplace. They've had sugar stimulating them since the onset of their 20s. This is going to impact their spending habits. This is going to impact the value they put on certain assets, including real estate. So when you're speaking to a millennial homebuyer about the economy or their ability to purchase real estate, this is very important to keep in mind. A quick prediction on interest rates, because why not close this thing on a dicey note? Bill Ackman, CEO of the $16 billion hedge fund Pershing Square, has been betting against bonds since August. His bet, which is known as shorting bonds, has made him millions in profit in this short time. He said there was too much borrowing, too many bonds, and so he was going to short treasuries. But 4 days ago, on Monday, October 24th, he made one very simple tweet that moved markets this week. You can read about it. I'll put the link below. If he's right, the economic reports are going to start catching up. A recession will become more obvious, and interest rates will cool because investors will come back to bonds as a safe haven. Long story short, he covered his short, and it might be good news for us.